and also other committee members. Let's do roll call now.
Okay, Chairperson Jan Clark-Kretz.
Here.
Bonnie London.
Here.
Ryan DiMartini.
Here.
Jean Wilson.
Here.
And Eden Lee, looks like he's not here, nor Miguel Yukovic. And neither of our auxiliary members here at this time are here at this time.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for committee comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody on the committee have anything they'd like to discuss not on the agenda right now? Hearing and seeing none, is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none. And now we'll move on to adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second, Jean.
Roll call, please.
Okay, Jan Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Bonnie London.
Yes.
Ryan DiMartini.
Yes.
Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I see that Ramona Brockman is here now, so.
Excellent.
Thank you, Carol.
All right, now we're going to move to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments about the consent agenda, either on our committee or from the public? And hearing, seeing none at this point, we would then perhaps have a motion to adopt that.
I so move. Jean.
I second. Roll call, please.
Yes, Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Bonnie London.
Yes.
Jan Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Ryan DiMartini.
Yes.
And that's everyone. Thanks.
All right, now we're going to move it right on over to committee matters and Mary Beth.
Yes, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here today. As you may know, this is a continuation from our previous meeting on September 16th. So we're going to pick up where we left off, and I'll turn it over to Mark. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Welcome back, everyone, to Groundhog Day. And this is kind of where we were before. However, one of the committee members, I think it was Bonnie, suggested we take a look at some photos. So I believe you all received these. Thank you, Mary Beth, for putting them into PDF because they were on a spreadsheet, which would have been a little more onerous. And I won't belabor these, but the intent was that the committee have access to these and maybe have an opportunity to look at them to see if they would help inform the discussion. From a general plan perspective, they can be used for illustrations to help enforce an intent or expectation on the part of the town. But anyway, here they are as requested, the various uses. There's 4 pages of them, and it wasn't my expectation or intent to go through them. The photos are awesome, and they cover a whole wide range of land uses that we'll have to consider as part of the general plan, as well as some circulation pieces. And the intent is to provide an example of things that resonate with folks that live in Loomis. So unless there's something else the subcommittee wanted to talk about, I was just showing this to show that they were received and available for everyone to look at.
Did Bonnie have any particular things she wanted to note with these?
No, when we were talking about just, I think some of the setbacks and how things would look to maintain a rural look, I just thought that might be helpful to have a visual for us to reference.
So I think, Mark, if you can keep this as a little placeholder out there to share as we go through these things, and we can reference back the higher densities, the different examples that are presented in those photos. Some of them are very indicative of certain, whether it's cottage styles and things like that. So if we can just kind of keep it queued up and handy just in case, that'd be great.
And I also think it'll be helpful for the full land use committee when we're talking definitions of land uses and what it's expected in different neighborhoods and things. So anyway, thank you for that. We had gone through a series of policies, remind the subcommittee where we are with that. We're basically toward the end of this. We had this last page to go through. There were some comments in here, and this was the last comment about perhaps including a policy that had a landscape requirement for certain roadways, particularly like I-80 or Sierra College Boulevard, where the idea is, yes, we understand that there may be development along those roadways, but we want some landscaping and some trees, not palm trees, but trees, actual trees along there, and perhaps an opportunity for trails and so forth to keep the Loomis rural character in areas as they head toward the middle of town. So,
but are we going to discuss that, or is that just assumed? We didn't really, that was a comment, but we didn't really discuss it.
That's right. That's where we are, right here.
Okay.
Right here. And that's where we left off. So if you don't like the idea, great. I mean, this was just a comment that was made. So let's begin.
Mark, could you blow up your screen a little bit? The print's a little small.
Oh, you didn't mean that way. All right.
Now, you also had comments from last time about the Rockland Road discussion on the 4.6, and I thought maybe we needed to clarify that, because
I thought we had already clarified that.
well, your comment made it sound like we were still requiring 4.6, and did I not understand your comment on the right-hand side when I went back and about having, it was something about, did we want to change that? So did we have to add more makeup land use? And I thought we shouldn't have to if we took out that reference to 4.6, or is the 4.6 stand?
Whatever the RE is, we just left it. I thought we left it.
Jean, where are you?
It was the one along Brace Road. No,
Which
not,
item?
I mean Rockland Road. Along Rockland Road, where we had, that had to be 4.6 if it faced Rockland Road, but it was brought out that that was in the RE area. And so there was a conflict there.
Subcommittee took that text out, G.
Right, then the comment.
This
I thought I
is
read,
ancient. This can go away.
okay,
So I did not go back in and change any of this because I didn't want the subcommittee to think that we had changed
okay,
it.
that's fine. No, I misunderstood. I didn't know
Okay.
that that was a taken out comment. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So this is where we are.
So I still have problems with the commercial uses, and I think that needs to be looked at, but maybe whatever you had come to along the one about along the highway, partly I understand that. On the other hand, when you've got a major commercial development, they add Horseshoe Bar, I don't think that they're really going to want to be like set back and buffered. If you have that kind of thing, they need to be seen from the freeway, and they need to be seen from far enough away that people have time to decide to get into that lane and get off. So it makes more sense maybe by the RV if that RV part goes in, but I'm not sure that we should require that. I would think that kind of thing should go into whatever the proposal is for the project, rather than us deciding that they needed a 100-foot buffer when we haven't even seen what's being proposed.
Anders, did you mention that when you were consulting with Folsom, that they have some standard where from the freeway, development can't begin until a certain, could you explain what you?
Yeah, briefly, the City of Folsom General Plan has a requirement of a 100-foot buffer between Highway 50 and development, and that is in place. So if you drive along Highway 50, you kind of see a sneak peek of office buildings through the oak tree savanna. So that is our policy. So the buildings don't come up close, but you can see, I know you can see a bit of the Intel building, and there's a couple of office buildings you can just see a piece of through the 100-foot buffer.
But then it doesn't sound like that's trying to get people off the freeway for a major shopping area, the commercial development. It sounds like that's a different kind of development. Is that right?
Down there by Broad Meadows in Folsom, they have the same buffer. The contours are a bit different, so you absolutely see all the commercial development as you drive Highway 50 on that portion of the freeway. So the intent was just to leave some of the existing natural buffer and not have the development up against the freeway. Now, there is signing that is visible from the freeway for those major office complexes. So like Costco has a sign, there's another sign right there at the freeway interchange for a number of the uses along that road. So, it doesn't prohibit anyone from seeing the development.
And Jean, my son lives in Folsom, and so we go there quite frequently. And I got to tell you, I'm trying to think of how many exits they have. It must be like 4 or 5, and they all have major commercial retailers off of each one, and they're always packed. I mean, it's pretty busy. It doesn't prevent people from not pulling off and stopping.
Honestly, most people nowadays, even with RVs, navigate with GPS. You could put this thing hidden somewhere. If they want to go, they'll go. However, it is up to the town how they want their community to look from major roadways. And that can be done whether or not there's a use in hand or whatnot. But
Now, this would be too late to affect the RV park anyway, wouldn't it? Since that's an application already in?
it is, Anders, is that a discretionary action, or is it a compatible use, basically ministerial at this point?
There's action coming forward that looks like the November Planning Commission agenda. They'll review that project. And yes, it's too late since they've made their application, and it's going out for agency review right now.
Fair enough.
Well, rather than a requirement, can we make it a recommendation or something?
Mark, could you put the text back up?
Yes, please.
Can you see all of that?
Where is it?
It's really not a text, it's just a comment right here, whether or not you want a setback.
Oh.
Does anybody on the committee have anything to add or your opinion on this? Ryan, are you?
I'm reviewing it again right now.
All right. Pardon me? Oh, Ramona. What do you think about buffers?
For major roadways, especially the I-80 and Sierra College, I would tend to agree on buffering those. Yeah, visibility is something that is important, but I tend to agree that it's not nearly as important as it used to be. People really have the ability now to go to any destination and find it, and they tend to know where they're going from the get-go. I don't think you get too many people who are just going to pull off because something looks interesting, especially if it's, a major commercial area.
Next, his
So,
presentation.
to me, it's very important, especially with the I-80 and, your gateways, if you will. Those are very important to be very concerned and consistent with what type of image you'd like to portray. And, if the commercial is there, I'd prefer to have it not be front and center and look like it could be along any part of any other freeway, along any other
I need it bigger than
town. So
the thing. Well, maybe I can do this. He has to-
Jean, I think you need to mute perhaps.
I'm on.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ramona. And I think somebody's hand's up. Greg?
Yeah.
Yes, hello. Thank you. No, I'm definitely in favor of having a buffer. If we can't do 100 feet, then maybe we can get away with 75 feet. And also, I think a buffer would give you the opportunity, the advantage of being able to put pathways, walkways, bicycle trails, et cetera, through that area. Now, I think the major pushback you're going to get maybe is from the retailers themselves, who are going to complain that, oh, well, that's taking away their parking. But I think we need to kind of stand firm and decide that I think aesthetically, that's an advantage to the town. And I think the opportunity for bikeways and walkways is really a strong incentive to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Bonnie?
Yeah, I completely agree with Greg.
Let's, okay, well, it looks like, I think, in terms of my opinion, what's that?
Jean, go ahead.
Well, Andrews was mentioning some things. Could we see a picture of that to see? Mary Beth, can you pull up something so we can see what actually is there now? And I'm not saying no buffer. I'm just not sure how much is needed, how much is 100 feet. I know along Barton Road, we have 50 feet between the road and Croftwood subdivision in back of us. So I have a feel for what 50 feet is. I don't have a good feel for just doubling that if that's what we need or not. But could we see, are there trees along that stretch?
Sorry, Gene, what stretch?
What we're talking about along the freeway and Horseshoe Bar, the Turtle Island area.
All right, hang on, let me pull up Google Earth and I will at least show you what our friends at Google have provided.
And while he's looking that up, I do have a question about a potential road that would come from Horseshoe Bar Road to serve those potential commercial things. Is there anything that committee has talked about? So would the buffer impinge on a
Circulation, you mean?
yes?
I don't believe there's any discussion of having a frontage road from the circulation committee. And it's not in the 2016 circulation element or the 2001 either.
And I'm not saying a complete road to go from Brace to Horseshoe Bar. I'm just saying that part of the TC, I think, is that all of the people that would be coming in would be coming from Horseshoe Bar Road. And so a roadway to service whatever happens in there, it seems to me naturally would follow along the freeway. So
the preliminary plans for one of the developments that we saw earlier on Turtle Island showed the road running along the same right-of-way path as the sewer line that was put in. So it went sort of in the middle of that big Turtle Island swath of
Oh.
property,
Okay.
because there's already right of way set aside for the sewer line that was put in there.
And then down Betty Lane, I think the sewer line goes.
That's correct.
Right.
So from a practical development standpoint, frontage roads are a loser. Because you have to pay for both sides of the road with only one side of development. And generally developers avoid it if they can. It's just really expensive. So this is I-80. This is the property we're talking about, the properties that we're talking about. And while there are trees, I personally wouldn't call it forested, but it's kind of just, I came back from Colfax earlier today, so. But certainly there's room along there to put more trees. Oh. Does that help?
Mark, can you go backwards on the freeway? Other way.
And, but after the court order, I'm not allowed to do that anymore.
So that we can see the very, very beginning of this.
Sure.
Thank you.
So you're moving backwards toward Brace, is that correct?
Trying to
Yes.
find this.
Yeah.
Let's just do this. Let's pretend I know what I'm doing. Actually,
There you go. Thank you.
do it this way.
That's helpful.
Okay, so there's Brace Road. Let's go right here. Driving slowly along the roadway. You know, if you
So
want to
how far back are some, like the tree on the right? That I'm trying to get some feel for what we're talking about with 100-foot buffer.
well, this fence would represent the Caltrans right of way. It's standard fencing for Caltrans. So the buffer would start on the other side of that fence. So theoretically, you can actually measure. So if that's the fence line, then 50 feet. So let's just assume that's the fence line. 50 feet looks like that.
So we're talking about 100 feet from the fence line, or 100 feet from the freeway can move outward and take up more space, right?
That's correct. That's why they would set the right of way that way. So
So we're talking about 100 feet in from the fence.
That's correct. So that would look something like that, more or less.
That really cuts those properties down.
Sure does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, if you can you pull up the parcel line? Can you show the parcels?
Not
Google Earth.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, those parcels, like that parcel, that driveway where on the other side is at the end of that one parcel, I think, one close to the freeway. So you're basically cutting half of that parcel out. That's a big swath of those properties. They're not very wide.
Yeah, those are small properties to start with. That's a massive cut to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I still think I would rather have some general, tell
You
the
broke up.
developer of Turtle, tell the developer of the property what we want, rather than set this in the, set some high expectations. But if we don't really, if we're just saying, well, we want it because we want it to look nice and we want trails and we want this and that, some of that is probably not realistic to expect that to go along there. For instance, we got a project that's likely to get approved in a month. We can't enforce it on that. And to have that kind of set back all the way up to Horseshoe Bar, It just seems to me some of this should come into the development agreement or whatever we end up with. But state the kind of thing that we want so that they know we have an expectation. Maybe we need to talk about what kind of expectation we have, which is kind of nebulous to me.
I mean, if the idea is to provide a visual break, so you're not seeing the development from the freeway, you don't necessarily need to do that with a 100-foot setback. You could do that with a policy that says projects along I-80 and Horseshoe Bar or whatever should be screened from the road with vegetation or trees, or I mean, if it depends on what you're looking to do. But I think that implementing even a 50-foot setback from the freeway, from the right of way of the freeway, that even 50 feet cuts those properties down to the point where they might not even be usable. So if the idea is to just provide a visual, buffer, then maybe we talk about ways to provide a visual buffer and not have it necessarily be a setback. Because whether it's 50 feet or 100 feet, you're still going to be able to see whatever's built there.
Greg has his hand up.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted already. So, do we have money in the tree mitigation bank? And that would be a great use of that money, is to plant along there to increase the vegetation and reduce that setback to like 25 feet. 25 feet, you could still get a walkway, pathway through that area, and that would provide a lot of connectivity in the town. I think, I would be interested to see what retailers and developers would have to say, but somewhere you're going to need some roadways into those projects. And I don't know if that's I kind of hesitate to try to put the access off of Brace Road. That's going to create a lot of problems on that side. So if you did have a frontage road that would be able to access those properties, the developers have to do that one way or the other anyway. So anyway, that's maybe down to 25 feet, and that would give you plenty of room to, plant some trees, have some kind of a pathway, and perhaps not intrude, too much into those properties. Sean has a real good point. 100 feet does carve off a pretty significant section off those properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Anybody else have any comments?
Mark, could you pull up the text again, please?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, real quickly though, when people are talking frontage road, are you talking about a road that starts up here and then goes to the freeway and then comes along here and comes back?
So what we're saying, Mark, is that a road is going to have to be necessary coming from Horseshoe Bar to service whatever happens in the TD area there. And it is not meant to go out on Brace Road. It's just meant to, help people get into whatever happens in there. So,
not being a transportation expert, and not being a fire expert, I can pretty much tell you that's a non-starter.
oh, what?
You're going to have two ways in and out of this area. So it's going to connect in some way.
Yeah, whether it's a full road or it's an EVA or whatever it is, but for a project to get built on that section there, you'll have to have some sort of a connection to Brace Road. You can't just have one way in and one way out. And it's not because of the way that the secret ravine is. You wouldn't be able to have it be a loop to go down and then come back up. And even if you did, if there was a fire, people would get stuck in there. There's going to have to be some sort of a connection to Brace for that property to be developed. But like I was saying, the EVA, or not the EVA, the right of way is already set aside with an easement for that sewer line, and it wouldn't make sense to me to have a frontage road and then have that right of way sitting, because you can't build on top of the right of way as well. If there's going to be a connection, it's basically been planned out for that connection to be done on the sewer line right away. I'm looking at Google Maps to see if you can actually see it. Let me look real quick.
We had a
I
map.
think on Google Maps, it does show up as a dirt road on the property site.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can. Yeah, so
Yeah.
So if you can you
There
can
it
you
is.
change it? Yeah, right there.
Yep.
So that line right there is the sewer right of way.
You can see it
That's
curves.
already been
it curves over and then comes down
Right.
to Betty.
Comes down to Betty Lane.
right.
And then it
So I think
crosses
you're-
over and goes in Diaz Lane. I,
The sewer
I
line,
think-
yes, it does, yes.
I think the idea was that, as it says, it would go from the major commercial at Horseshoe Bar down to what, offices and things as it went toward Brace. And the idea, I think, was that there wouldn't be a lot of commercial kind of traffic with the offices, the same way as stores and freeway traffic coming off the freeway to shop.
Yeah, my guess that this sort of connection would be used predominantly by locals.
And Miguel was correct. I'm sorry he's not here today because he remembers some of these things pretty well too. Miguel was correct that those smaller properties wanted to be in the tourist commercial, hoping to capitalize on when that project went in, then the offices and other kinds of things would go in below the major commercial. And so they could capitalize on getting their properties into some other kind of development within the TD zone.
Okay, text.
The question I have now, which is kind of tangential to the setback thing, is on Brace Road, if we don't want commercial coming out on Brace Road, and I think there are good reasons not to have that, then what do the people who are the owners there now think about that? It's been 20 years on no development that they would keep their properties, say at RR or something, rather than have them commercial TD. Because I think we need to do something about the commercial frontages on Brace Road. I know Ryan thinks it would be good to have commercial, but maybe we should look at, settle the setback question and then come back here. I like Sean's idea better. I'm more comfortable with saying that they need to have a buffer or visual buffer to the freeway than setting a distance, unless we're basically saying we're requiring you to put in trails and other things. I mean, is that what we're requiring here? Is that why we're saying you need more than a visual buffer?
If we could go back to the text, please. So if we just look at item C, that's going to be one of the things that we need to talk about. Secondly, I believe that this setback was something that was recommended to us.
By a comment.
Yeah, well, I think it was by Anders. Wasn't it you, Anders?
Yeah, I brought that up at one of the committees about a way to protect the rural atmosphere of Loomis. So yeah.
Right. And I think hearing from a lot of the committee members, they like the idea of it, but you know, looking at that property, it's got a lot of angles to it, and there's a lot of different parcels in there. So sounds like we would like to maybe perhaps recommend something, although we don't know exactly what that is. But it seems like having some sort of a buffer with any kind of a rule to it might not, I don't know, have to Ramona, your hands up.
Yeah, now that we actually got to see in real images and, measurements, that property is pretty challenging. It's kind of similar, I think, in sense in some ways that the village property is pretty challenging too, just because of the highway and that there are kind of triangle parcels and with the frontage of the highway. So as far as the buffering goes, I don't know if it's, like Jean was saying, maybe it is something that would be done as a development standard for that particular development. And that's kind of more assuming that somebody comes forward with one large project, or I guess you could do it for smaller projects. But the other thing it brings to mind is I think when we last left this a month ago, was I requested that we have the Main Street consultant kind of look at this particular zone, this land use designation, and see what the Main Street consultant seems to think of it, because I think we're almost kind of more just all these issues in traffic going onto Barton and commercial things. Maybe the land use designation is not really what maybe it's more a question of what should we really designate that land use to be, because it sounds like there's a lot of constraints. There's concerns with traffic and with setbacks and buffer and rural character. So I'm almost just questioning the whole land use designation in itself. Don't have an answer as far as what else it could necessarily be that would be, it used to be rural estate, I think. But just a thought to kind of bring it back into the bigger 30,000 foot view of saying maybe a different land use designation might help some of these issues not be such a concern or a problem.
We keep going back between land use and buffer. Let's start with buffer. I think that policy sub D might cover the issue about the design on the Turtle Island project or adjacent to the freeway, without getting into an actual setback, but it talks about providing a design and appearance that reinforces the rural character of Loomis, existing, incorporating features, etc. And when a project comes forward, then I think that could be looked at. And I believe that policy was used in the review and recommendations on the RV part that is going to be before the commission in November.
So what you're saying is just elaborate more on the text here.
That elaborate or leave it as is, but I would say this text begins to cover it. The only thing you may want to say is something to the effect of maintain that rural appearance from those persons traveling on Interstate 80. You could say something like that that would help further refine it without giving a buffer. But I, as a staff member looking at projects, this provides a lot of things that we can work with.
So I think the concern is that we want to add something, as you say, that addresses that we do have a concern along the freeway in particular. Not just at the freeway, but.
So I agree with Ramona that it would be nice to get some feedback from, I think it's Michelle Reeves that you're referring to, who did the Main Street consulting before, because I do think that there was some suggestion about having landscape architectural standards so that, again, we can actually create that visual without, I guess, having to have that large buffer, but just visually with plants, with landscaping.
That's pretty granular for a general plan. I mean, I think that's something you would do as part of your implementation and design standards. At this point, it would be based on a policy as it's written here. And this gives you the flexibility to do that. If you wanted to add something additional for passersby on I-80, then we could certainly add that text here. We don't want to go backwards on this because then we would have to find additional land to put the housing units the TD allows. I believe it's up to 10 per acre. And if we go to RE or we go to something else that allows less than that, then we have to find someplace else to put those units. And we already haven't had anybody step up on the 2.2 acres that we already need. From my perspective, the way the policies are written now pretty much convey what you're trying to get at. I don't recall Brace Road is designated as what?
Brace Road is designated an arterial, so it's intended to have traffic. Yeah, but let's talk about the buffer. Let's talk about appearance before we start talking about land uses. So.
Okay, so from a buffer standpoint, I think you got it. If you don't want to put a number in there, that's fine. You can always add a number later, and the number doesn't need to be the same everywhere. It can be wherever it needs to be as you're going through that. But for the general plan level, looking at an individual property and then trying to pivot that for a policy for the rest of the town, I think we would be here a long time.
And I just want to remind the committee that this is coming from the old general plan. And these words were not put in by anybody. So it currently does say be set back and or buffered. That's all from the old general plan.
Hey, Mary Beth, you just went through the review on the RV park. Did you feel it was adequate, this language, to do what you did and get the project where it needed to be?
They're meeting the setbacks from the freeway, including the freeway right-of-way. And because of the type of project it is, their buffer will be a sound wall with vegetation in front of it.
But did this language give you enough information when you were reviewing the project to get this project put into, to do what needed to be done?
Yes, we found that this was, it met the requirements of their application.
I thought we were moving away. We've been not wanting sound walls. No, that's not my personal position necessarily, but I thought that was written in that we were not having sound walls somewhere.
Yeah, they are discouraged in this case because an RV park and the noise element, the noise volumes from the freeway were too high. So that kind of kicked it to the requirement to have a sound wall in order to protect public health and safety.
So, I drove down Walnut so that I could kind of see where it ended and where Heritage Park, and they've got a large berm. That was really lovely. I mean, I didn't feel like I was right by the freeway.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something else to consider, but again, maybe we're getting too granular here.
Well, and even for the RV park, not to make a giant sound wall, they're doing, I believe it's a 3-foot berm, and then on top of that.
The 2-foot berm with the 8-foot fence on it.
Yeah, 2-foot berm, 8-foot wall.
Yeah, but getting back to the buffer and not talking about that project, the question was, does this policy provide the town enough ammunition to require those things? And especially when Turtle Island comes in, is it adequate to do what you would like to do, which is, keep that rural character of Loomis in reviewing that project? That's the question. And do we need additional language to enhance that policy?
So I see that and or, the or has been crossed out. Is that?
Where are you?
Okay, going back to the
item
now.
C.
Oh, we're talking about item D right now, aren't we?
I thought we were.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of us thought we were on C. We are talking about buffering, correct?
And C and D.
And the buffering is directly linked to that little dotted line that says, I don't know.
So changing the and or to an and was my doing last time. I recommended taking out the or because it just confuses what we're trying to accomplish with that sentence, and or is legally tricky to interpret.
Got it. So then, since some of us think we're on B and C, can we move the text so we can see both B and C then?
We can,
C
no,
and
D and
D?
C and D.
C and D,
Oh,
okay.
C
C
and
and
D.
D.
He's done. Yeah, that's good to see.
All right, so since C is before D, can we just do C first?
Okay, is there
Well-
any change to C then?
Yeah,
Are there any changes to D, or are we coming back to it? Why do
We
we
will come
finish
back to D after C. Let's wrap up C.
Okay, C may take a while.
so when you say take a while, Jean, let's take that while. What do you mean?
Not to be pedantic here, but the subcommittee went through C. We were on D when we ended the meeting. But we can go back and revisit C if you'd like. We already discussed this at great length, almost an hour last time. What do we
That's
need to
because
do?
it's a serious matter, Mark. It's a very serious matter. It's not
I'm
a
not-
light matter.
I'm not saying it's not a serious matter,
Yeah.
Gene. I'm simply
Yeah,
saying. the
I didn't
subcommittee
think
went
we
through
were
this before.
finished.
Yeah, so we need to finish C, and we are going to do that for sure. We're going to, if we have to have robust conversations about it, we will.
So Anders, if I remember correctly, the recommendations that this committee makes will go into a survey that will go to the residents. Because if I'm understanding Jean correctly, I mean, your concern is, those residents who live there on Brace and the impact that they may have. And so we will be making recommendations with some options. And then the residents will actually be able to provide some feedback on, what's acceptable to them, what's not acceptable.
It will go out showing the recommendations of the committees to the planning commission. So it will be out there, and it will be, if the intent is to go out to the residents within the town. So they will have an opportunity to look at this.
Bonnie, I don't think we discussed talking about the residents of Brace before now, as far as asking them anything. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we said anything about that.
Previously, the committee made a recommendation to leave the existing land use designation in place. And then at this committee, the committee did have a vote on C, and it moved forward. One real, I guess a question is, what kind of commercial do you envision on those 14 parcels of 17 acres that is going to cause so much traffic on Brace Road? I guess that's the question. And what's interesting is that looking at the 14 parcels, 19 acres, it would, if you had RE, 28 units could be allowed on there. If you had RR, it's 76 units. The traffic generated by those residential uses is basically equal to the traffic that would be allowed on the existing land use designation. But the volume of traffic doesn't change between those uses, just because you could have so many residential uses. So,
How many?
what's the question here? What's the issue that we're trying to resolve with this?
How many actual commercial lots do we have then on, you're saying 17 and 19, are those all fronting on Brace Road or not?
Those are the parcels facing, there are 14 parcels which total about 19 acres that face on Brace Road or have access to Brace Road directly.
Trying to see if I can find those, Gene. Let's see.
So you're saying if those were put into RE, they would have potentially, with the new housing law, X number of units?
No, RE is just that's without the new housing law that allows doubling of that. So
No, that's with,
RE is 1 per 2.3 acres.
right, so about 28 units.
Wait, if you said it was 19 acres.
Approximately.
So 19 acres at 2.3 per acre cannot have that many units.
Andy, the numbers were with the housing laws that just came out.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chrissy. Okay, so I'm correct that those units are with the new housing laws.
So that would be the the fourplex on each of these allowable parcels, or you split the parcels and then have
Right,
four on each? Is that what you're saying?
that's correct.
Greg?
Do we have any control on the type of commercial that goes in?
Based on the land use designation, there is control on it. Yeah.
If I could just remind everybody right now to mute. I think that we've invited Beth to not to unmute, and I know Jean's talking, but there's some feedback from somebody else. Can everybody just check and make sure you're all muted? Thank you. And now,
Could we take another road trip here? Because then I think maybe people will see the concern about access to these parcels. If we could take a road trip from Horseshoe Bar, like Mark did down the freeway, to see how people are going to wind traffic, to wind through to get to these parcels. It's not a safe place already. And I didn't realize it was designated as an arterial, which is for more, is that more the same as Barton Road?
It's the same as Barton.
Could I make a comment?
sure.
Okay.
There is, and Beth, it looks like there is feedback coming from so maybe if you take your video off.
Okay.
Sorry, I would love to see you, but yeah, and then that might be a little better.
Does that help?
Slightly, there's still some feedback.
There's a ventilation system I can't shut off in this room that I'm in. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll make it quick. So I live off of Brace Road on DS Lane, and I grew up on Brace Road. My parents live at the end of Betty Lane. Well, my mother does now. So I understand that this property has gone through a lot of developers have looked at it. So my concern is, when I'm looking at C, is the traffic on Brace Road. If and when Costco goes in, it's going to drag a lot of traffic down Brace Road. People are going to use it as a shortcut to get to Costco. It's a 2-lane road, and it's got a lot of blind spots on it. There's also a creek that runs, through it, that crosses it. So my concern is not that the land shouldn't be developed, but it needs to be very conservative of how it's developed, because you've got the creek, you've got that hill that comes down, that dips down to the creek, and I'm just concerned about traffic getting dumped off onto Brace Road from that parcel. That was the comment I wanted to make. When we're talking about how will it be developed, I don't know that it's wise to dump traffic onto Brace Road from that parcel. That was all I had to say.
Thank you, Beth. And when I just want to maybe have you come back and say, when you say that parcel, are you talking about a specific parcel or just that area in general?
I'm sorry. I was talking about that parcel off of Horseshoe Bar that isn't developed yet. That acreage.
Okay, okay, you're talking about all of that. Okay, thank you. And you actually can turn back your video because it didn't make any difference, and we'd much rather see you. So thank you. And Ryan DiMartini has his hand up.
Yeah, Anders, you mentioned that even if we did change it to the designation to some type of residential, the overall traffic isn't going to be too much different if it stays the way it is now versus having it be a residential aspect.
Correct.
So with that,
just on the number of vehicles that would be utilizing it. So there is a difference. Generally your commercial probably is not being used during peak hours. Your residential most likely will use the roads during peak hours, leaving for work, coming home from work. So there are some differences in the traffic patterns between the tourist, commercial and residential, but total number of vehicles is going to be about the same onto that road.
That does make an assumption though about Loomis, that we are going to build out to those maximums, split the lot and put 4 on each one, which may in the long term, but unless a developer comes in and buys those up and does it, I don't know that the Loomis people who live here are likely to do that, because the reason they live there and like Loomis is because they want space around them, and they're not all, everybody here is not anxious to put a, split their lot and put a fourplex on each.
Oh yeah, I get that completely. Just my thought process when going through this is that we are thinking long term. We're not thinking right now, we're not thinking 5 years, we're thinking long term. Because look how long this general plan lasted versus we're making updates now, 20, 30 years down the road. So if the traffic's going to be the same, just with different patterns, I understand where Beth's coming from regarding safety and that concern, but it's still one of those, the traffic's going to be there. If it's residential, if it's not, it doesn't matter if it's now or if it's 20 years down the road, it's going to be there.
I think there are more serious safety concerns than people who are not out here understand. And who is the person from DS Lane?
Beth.
Beth. Beth talked about the bridge and cite what people are, well, if you're making a left turn from Barton onto Brace, there are 2 dips down to the bridge where if people are not going at the correct speed limit, you don't see those cars when they're coming up out of the dip. They're hidden and it's not very safe. If you look at, that's why I asked Mark if we could see the route. If we have people that are coming to that commercial and they can't go through the TD properties and they have to go from the freeway, Mark, can we do a road trip the way you did the other one? For people to see what the action, I mean, this smooths out all the curves. Can we take a road trip from the freeway down and look and see what it's like, all the twists and turns in this road? And
you're
Bill,
talking about Brace Road, right?
I'm
Brace.
talking about if we were to go, if traffic is going to come to Brace Road Commercial from Horseshoe Bar, which is going to be the main access until you can go through TD, look and see what it actually is like driving from that intersection on Horseshoe Bar. The way you're going to have to access this is to come around down Horseshoe Bar, and they really have straightened out the curves. That's why I like to see a road trip kind of thing. Then you have 2 T's close to each other to make the turn again. Where are you now?
Horseshoe Bar at the park and ride.
Okay, travel down Horseshoe Bar, and you're not going to be at 40 miles an hour like the people are that are winding around these things too fast. But go down Horseshoe Bar and people can see how much curve there is, how much dip there is. Just keep going until you get to the T and then turn right. However fast it'll let you go.
I can ride my bicycle through faster than that.
Yeah. No, you get smashed against the edge, Grant. See, up on the left side, there's no room to move up. There's a cliff there that we just passed. Now you're going over Secret Ravine. And around this curve is where Bill, what's his name, lives, and there have been accidents there on the right-hand side. more than one. And then there's another curve here. I mean, it doesn't show up at this speed like it does when people are going 40 miles an hour, but that's what they're going. Then you go turn, this is to get to this area of brace. Turn right. And you go a half a block and you turn right again on brace. Turn right, you go past the Methodist church and eventually you will get down to the creek, but there are these dips before you get there. So if you're turning left from Barton here, you may or may not see the oncoming traffic, depending on whether they're going the speed limit or speeding, because if they went into the dip at the wrong speed, this is the Brace Road WPA bridge. So we're still not to the TD area.
There it is.
It's on the right. We passed already. Sea Otter Swim is not in this area. And Little Orchard, here's where the proposal for that RV park is. But you can see this really is a rural area that you're going through. And so that's why it has the thing about preserving the rural corridor.
So I guess I'm at a loss. I'm confused. What is the main concern that you're having, Jean? Is it in regards to the race itself and traffic? Is it in regards to the zoning of that land? Is it that's where I'm, because
The zoning, the zoning, the problem came up when we found out last time, 2 weeks ago, that we could not prevent access to Brace Road, that we have to allow with the TD zoning, we have to allow all that commercial access to Brace Road, which we did not have until 2 weeks ago, as far as we knew. We thought we were protecting Brace Road because they could not have access. It was going to have to be through TD. Now, if we
Yes.
can't have that, that changes the whole thing about commercial on Brace and what's going to happen there. So how do we control that so that we don't have all that, don't turn that into a commercial corridor?
so your
The
big
way to
concern is
control,
the traffic, it sounds like.
Pardon?
Your big concern is the traffic that would be produced off of this.
A lot of that, yes, as well as the visual appearance. It's not going to look very rural once you develop all that, but I think there,
Aren't we addressing the visual appearance
with no
with
further
the
access,
buffer off Brace, as well as the visual screen off Brace to help preserve the rural look that's written in there right now?
is that sufficient?
It depends on the landscaper and the developer when they put it in, as well as the plan that's approved.
But they can have basically any kind of commercial that's on Turtle Island property, they can put down there. Is that correct?
I believe we talked about how it kind of transitioned to a different type of commercial going from Horseshoe Bar over towards the freeway.
Well, does that still stand?
Where that was a big part of the conversation we were having, is that it slowly, I think it was an A, wasn't it? But right there, yeah, it transitioned from being commercial by Horseshoe Bar towards offices or that kind of thing, going down into the triangle, which offices usually don't have that much traffic. And they have more room for landscaping and buffering and appearance.
Is locally oriented a problem here? In other words, do we have to take that out so that it's then just general, any old kind of commercial?
I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we take out locally oriented, then it would be any general type of commercial. But with that, then it's gives us more flexibility in regards to what we believe locally oriented is.
Okay, so we don't have to define that anymore and we don't have to take it out like we took it out someplace else. All right, so that's good.
So before we move on, though, are you guys now suggesting you'd like to take out locally oriented on item B?
No.
If it's going to help us, I wouldn't take it out.
Okay, so keep it in.
Yeah.
And then I think Sean has something he's been wanting to say.
Mark, can you pull up the map again, the land use map? Is the concern the big parcel, the TD parcel, or is the concern the smaller parcels from Betty Lane over? Because I remember during the last meeting we talked about all that, and I thought that it got resolved.
I believe so.
We
Yeah,
had a vote on it. Yeah, we had a vote on it, and that is the language that's currently in the general plan. And there was a vote to leave the TD designation on that property. Because
Yes.
that property is 14 parcels in that little piece. The rest that you see on Brace Road is either residential or, well, it's a whole lot of residential on Brace Road.
So what I think the problem is that Jean's point is, she felt that these commercial properties were not to have access on Brace Road. And I think when we were voting, we were just talking about not changing any of those land uses. But I don't think that we did get a resolution, or from Jean anyway, in terms of how access is going to be on those 19 parcels. But those 19 parcels now either have access to Brace Road, Betty Lane, or Martin. Is that
Correct.
right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question to Eugene is, those people that own those 19 parcels already know that they have an NTD zoning.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that if they already have an orientation as to how they get in and out, it seems like that would kind of go with it.
The only parcel that I can remember that we approved, and this was under one of Bob's things, which we got sometimes different sorts of advice on. It is a commercial, but it's basically an office, and their use permit does not allow them to have any customer. It's just the 4 employees. It looks like it's just a house. So that kind of thing, would we still be allowed to have that sort of thing? That sort of restriction or not?
So that would be a zoning issue, correct?
Yes, it would be the allowable uses under the zoning code for the TD land use designation.
So Jean, are you in agreement or in disagreement on the TD land use designation?
My concern is if it's thought that one paragraph provides sufficient restrictions or whatever for us to be able to have some control over what goes in there and how much traffic we're going to generate from what goes in, then that's okay.
So basically, if it provides sufficient flexibility to allow us to still have commercial go in, but maintain the feel of Loomis while keeping traffic at a minimum compared to having a shopping center there is kind of what you're going for. And if that paragraph does that,
Yeah, that kind of thing. So if you think that is sufficient, then okay, let's just move on.
Okay, well, if we do look at the text on, and this is C, we're on, just want to make sure, because what it says is provide primary access to commercial development from Horseshoe Bar Road with limited secondary access on Brace Road. Is that what the text
No, we jumped
Back
up
I'll
to
show
to,
the
text,
text.
please.
Let me show you the text in a second, but can somebody explain to me why you wouldn't go off of this off ramp and make a right-hand turn to get to those sites? Why you would do this circuitous route more than once?
And you
People
know
do.
what? We have a public comment actually from somebody that's in the
That's not
audience
an
here.
off ramp. That's an overpass, Mark.
Right here, this is Sierra College. There's an off ramp.
Oh, that off ramp?
Yeah, Sierra College.
Because people would want to avoid about half a dozen stoplights. And the people from the Loomis direction wouldn't go all the way down there.
So this would be local traffic, because if I'm coming from out of the area, I don't care about stoplights. I care about navigating this maze of roads, particularly if I'm pulling something. But okay, that was my answer. Thank you. Here's the text.
Thank you. We have a public comment.
Hi, my name is Richard Fembert. I live on 4180 Barton Road, which is right near the corner of Brace, which is in question. I'm also a representative of the land on 6017 on Brace Road. And with that being said,
You can use this
Oh.
one. That's plugged in right there.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, that way you don't have to. Just
Yep.
lean down into it.
Yeah, with that being said, the main concerns that we have as residents is when that Costco does eventually go in, there is going to be a lot of people that try and bypass that traffic that come right down Brace. There is our daughter's preschool is right in Brace as well, right in that TD zone. So that's our main concern is if we put a thoroughfare in from Brace to Horseshoe Bar, that's going to generate even more traffic and trying to become a secondary thoroughfare from Sierra College Boulevard all the way through to Horseshoe Bar.
And I don't think that that's from my perspective, that creating that road from Horseshoe Bar to Brace isn't really what we're talking about with this, because there has to be a secondary access, right? If something gets developed there has to be a way for folks to get out if there's a fire on the one end or whatever. But that doesn't have to be a full road or a full intersection going all the way down. It can be an emergency vehicle access. So that way, you wouldn't have, it would have, a gate or bollards or something on there to stop the traffic. Because I agree with you I think that's right. You're going to have a bunch of traffic going, basically using it as a shortcut. But I think that I'm still a little bit confused about why I thought that this was wrapped up talking about from Martin, or actually from Betty, over that we were either going to leave it as TD, because if we didn't, then we would need to go back and talk to property owners, et cetera, et cetera. If we leave it as TD, they have a land use right to access their property off of Brace Road, because there's no way that they'd be able to access it off of Horseshoe Bar right now, at least.
Yeah, and the part that I think we agreed upon to help with Gene's concerns was in B, the line that reads, moving toward Brace Road, uses shall then transition to more locally oriented commercial and office uses laid out to provide a pedestrian orientation. Is that kind of what we're hoping for, Gene?
Yeah, I think,
Perfect.
if you think that's sufficient to protect what we want to protect on the,
I think it's going to be. Because then the only part that's going to have the issue is the big one next to Horseshoe Bar.
and C, maintaining the rural residential character.
Yep.
That's part of what's important too.
Yeah, so both of those combined would help maintain the look of Loomis and keep traffic reduced.
Okay, and I think Jan is correct. We voted on one, but not the other item. So but I think
You cut out there a little bit, Jean.
Oh, I think you were correct, Jan, that we voted on one, but we didn't really finish this discussion.
No, we didn't. And I know that some may wonder why we're going down this again, is because Jean also sent in, a public comment, and it was very concerned about this area. And that's part of our job, is that we really do need to have these discussions. And that's why we're all sitting on these committees, is because we want to make it right. And if there's a concern, we need to hear it. And sometimes we do have to go back. But now hopefully we're all in agreement that C is fine. And now we can move on. And does anybody disagree with that? Is there any public members that have anything to say? All right, let's move on.
So D.
Anybody have anything to say or comment on D?
Is this new or the old one, or why is it underlined? We're striking it? What?
That's
So-
B.
No,
D
that's
hasn't-
E. D is not changed. D is right out of
Oh,
the
D is
general
not-
plan.
okay.
So there's no changes to D that has been offered up. Just want to make sure the committee sees that. And if there's any committee members that want to have anything changed, or do we just like it the way it is? I don't see anybody's hands raised, and I don't see anybody in the public that has anything to say. So sounds like D is good.
Okay, so
Now,
what this
E-
double underline means is that it was moved from elsewhere in the document to this location. So this is out of your current general plan, and it was too wordy of a policy, so we made it 2 policies. That's all it means. And so because it was moved, it's probably a little disconnected. So perhaps we should say the following issues for development within the TD or for development in this area. We should give it some geographic pin. And these were the list of uses that the town wanted to be addressed when the TD finally started to go. And I believe this referred to the larger TD parcels, not the little ones we've just been talking about.
and where did it come from?
I think it
Do you
came from
recall?
up here. I think it was up here as part of A. I'd have to go back to the original document to locate it. It's in the, if you go online, it will have been struck out and then moved as shown on the online text.
I think it's fine. I don't see why we need to mention TD again because they know that that's what we're talking about.
In this area. Okay, that's fair enough. Oh, here's where it was moved from. Never mind. It was in the intro. It's right here. And so this became a policy. And so it's down here. We figured we'd label it.
Okay, yeah, I found it. I see it too. Okay. Is anybody in disagreement with moving that, making it a policy? Anybody in the public? Okay, let's move on.
F.
And again, F we used to be E, is straight out of the old general plan.
Yeah, if there's no underline, strikeout, or if it's not blue, it's just plain old black text. It came out of your general plan verbatim.
Any comments on that? Okay, I don't see any, so then G.
And this was talked about before. This was a recommended policy to ensure that trails are connected, not only internally for development within that area, but also outside of that area.
Any comments on that one?
Hey, Andreas, do I get any rewards for having used trails 3 times in the same sentence?
You'd have to talk to the English teacher on that one.
I was wondering if Gene was going to call me out on that.
No. It's the simplest sentence in this whole section, so just leave it alone.
Success.
All right. Okay, I don't see anybody in disagreement, so it looks like that's done.
All been resolved. from my perspective, let me save this so that bad things don't happen. That ends the text. And I apologize for not remembering. Did we manage to get through the requests for land use designation changes?
No, we actually have not had, we haven't done any in any.
All right,
And then
so,
we haven't done any, so we need to do that.
all righty. So let me, so I think we kind of talked about this. Oops. Wow, what happened there? Okay. Does the committee have any changes that they want to bring for any of the area under our purview? And maybe we just put that in the back of our minds that this is something we should think about. And then the next one is, we're still looking for 2.2 acres. So if the committee has any ideas of where the 2.2 acres might go, I was thinking Gene might like it to go right in here, but that's just me teasing Gene. And then, you know, we have to come up with 2.2 acres. If the subcommittee has any ideas, it would certainly help the full land use committee, who cannot kick the can down the road. They're going to have to come up with it. But let's go to the requests. So we had 2 requests for changes. And so number 7, it's right here. And let me pull up the text that Christie's provided. Oh, where'd it go? Come on. Come to Papa. Stop it. No, no, I don't want you to go there. Stop it. You can laugh at me, but all of you talk to your computers too. Get rid of this. This is site number 7. I'll blow the text up. Is that okay? Can you guys see that? This was in your packet. It's not new. I'm just putting it up for the benefit of the public.
And you could probably skip down to the current request by the current owner.
Yeah, it was a little interesting. I've not seen that before.
I was under the impression that the P request was no longer a request because the school district wasn't buying that property after all. Is that not correct? That first one, is that off the table or not?
When you say the first one, is it the first one
Oh,
or the first request? Because I think that the property has been sold. The property has been sold, I believe.
right.
Oh,
But
okay.
I had heard that the public one was for the school, and that they were no longer, that somebody else has bought that and not the school district. So I'm wondering, maybe Mary Beth can speak to that.
Yeah, Jean. So the first change request was by the sisters, representative of Bridget Barnes. Since they sold the property, that's no longer standing, and then the current property owner put in the current request. And I have no idea if it's still part of the school district's plan. I know that schools are allowed in residential zones, but I haven't, I have no way of knowing whether or not they're going to continue that. I mean, in their request, it says Premier Homes intends on creating a reservation for the Loomis Union School District. So I would think that's still going forward.
I see.
And this request was dated August 23rd. So.
Which was after our time. Well,
The June 30th.
yeah.
Right,
And
but the original-
yes.
The original
So,
one-
as Jan indicated, that August 23rd request came forward after the June 30th deadline, but since the committee had not gotten to review land use change requests, we bring it to the committee at this time. Staff's recommendation is to not consider a change request where we know development's going to take place, such as the school district, additional houses and things like that. But it's up to the committee to make that decision and not staff's.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Anybody on the committee have any comments about this change request? Does anybody on the committee disagree with the staff's recommendation? And does anybody in the public have anything to say about this? Looks like Ramona does.
Actually, can you just repeat staff's recommendation again, please?
Staff's recommendation is that since we've discussed, and not at depth at all, but with the new owner of Premier Homes, I have no idea what it looks like, but in their comment request, it says to reserve it for a school and things like that. So there is that discussion already going on. And what we've done with the other applications that we have, although this isn't an application, we're not trying to task the committees with making those recommendations and putting it back on the property owner, future developer to submit for any kind of general plan amendment, zoning amendment outside of our general plan process. It still, can be considered by the committee because, what they're looking for is RE or RR, which there's, both in that same area. So obviously the owner wants to be able to split it into 2.3 acre minimums or 1 acre minimums while still reserving a site for the school.
One other piece of the staff's recommendation to not change this is every committee has discussed they don't want any changes to land use within the town of Loomis and to keep the town of Loomis the same. So that is also behind our recommendation of do not change this land use designation.
Thank you, Andy.
Does that answer that for you, Ramona?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, anybody disagree with the staff's recommendation? And I really like to hear from both public and committee members. Sounds like we will not be discussing that particular change then. What's the next one?
I just want to say on that one, I think it would be a mistake to change it for the reasons that staff says, as well as we need to keep considering how the parcels can get split again and further developed, which is going to take even more away from our RA rural zoning once we do that. And especially the RR, when we started out with RR, we had this visual image of a little kind of a ranchette on a 1 acre. But if you were to look at, for instance, Montclair subdivision, which is RR, so is St. Francis, but you can't get in there. But what is going in now on a 1 acre parcel is not a little ranchette home. It's going to be a mini mansion, McMansion, a starter castle.
Oh, I've not heard that. What a cool term, a starter castle.
I have not heard that either, Jean.
Jean, you're awesome.
So
anyway, that's what will go in on an RR anymore. If it goes in on a 4.6, it's not gonna, at least it's gonna have land around it. And I just think we need to leave if you look at this, it's mostly surrounded by our RA area, and across the street from it, yes, it's RE, but there's a church and the water tank. The first Poppy Ridge parcel, who knows if it'll ever get developed because it's so sloped that it's not, I think it may or may not ever get developed. And that development, except for 2 homes, is owned by one landowner who really wants to kind of keep it the way it is. And then there's another church. And then there's the one parcel that we decided could go back to 2.3 and not impose the 4.6. So it's still a fairly rural looking place across the street in the yellow. So to all of a sudden switch to the 2.3 with the obvious potential for splitting it again, or to go to RR with potential for splitting those to acre instead of 1 acre, I think none of that makes any sense. So I think the staff is absolutely right on there.
All right, so it does show 2 different change requests, though. So we were just talking about.
First one. So let me get you to the second one. The second one is at Horseshoe Bar and Brace Road.
Pardon me?
Which is, well, shudder given our previous discussion to show this, but there it is.
We haven't.
And let me pull up the text.
The request was not made by the landowner.
I'd like to rezone Andy's property. He won't mind. He's a nice guy. Okay, so
So we do have a public comment, but before we do, I'd like to have any committee comments on this. Bonnie?
I guess I would say that given the response of the people who live back in there and enjoy their privacy extremely, that's the kind of place that you see private drive, keep out sort of thing. And the comments, the concerns they had at Turtle Island, and were they going to be able to keep their privacy across the street? I think it's not likely that they're going to want to have low-income housing projects there.
Okay. Bonnie?
No, I just think it's very difficult to take considerations from someone who doesn't own the property, who's making suggestions on someone else's property.
Okay. And anybody else on the committee? And we have a public comment.
My name is Richard Femmert again. I represent the property on 6017 Brace Road, which is in the Zone 11. As a church, this is not something that we're interested in the future, present time, or ever, how we sit currently. As a resident on 4180 Barton Road, I also would not want to see this due to the congestion based off that corner of Horseshoe Bar and we're at that turnaround there and then the little jog down to Brace. It doesn't fit the general plan for the rurality of Loomis and what the residents and people here move for, and this would be a disservice to them.
Thank you. And staff's recommendation, is there one on this?
This actually ends up being part of the certified letters that went out to the existing property.
Mary Beth, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just picked up on that. So this request, because it was a non-property owner that made the request, the individual certified letters were sent to the actual property owners, and we're still receiving those in. They're kind of trickling in a couple a day. I don't have a feel that that area is supportive of that. There's, been a couple of lot line adjustments, the nice rural area, the traffic, the circulation around that area wouldn't support it either. I talked to a gentleman that was on Horseshoe Bar just to the east of the TD area. And then there's a couple of the RR parcels in between him and the TD. And he was totally not supportive. He owns 4 parcels right there. So I was able to at least get 4 parcels confirmed for no change. So as we know in this business, they have to be adjacent to the same designation in order to make some kind of change. So all of a sudden you take 4 out, you got 2 before it that maybe want it, and they could make that change, but it's going to stop right at this guy's property lines.
All right. Anybody on the committee have any comments? And any members of the public, any other comments? So it sounds like from what I'm gathering is that we will not be making any decisions on that. So I guess we can move on from public requests.
That's it, Chair, unless the committee has an idea where to put 2.2 acres of higher density land within the study area, or any other land use changes that might be considered.
So I guess then that identifying that minimum 2.2 acres would be just the final question for the group. Does anybody feel that there is a spot on this in our purview that we might be able to identify minimum 2.2? Anybody on the committee? Anybody in the public? Okay.
And maybe the question is, if you had to put 2.2 acres somewhere in here, where would you put it?
Okay. Thanks, Christy.
Rockland.
Looks like Ramona has her hand up.
Well, if I had to put it anywhere, I guess the only place I would really suggest for high density would be the tourist destination zoning, just because it doesn't make sense anywhere else, unless not really, because you already have St. Francis Woods there, and that's only rural residential. So in the southeast, what we're looking at in our scope for today, that would be the only place I would suggest, not saying it is a good place for it, but I can't see it going anywhere else south of I-80.
Thank you. Bonnie.
Does TD already have high density in a mixed use structure?
In a mixed-use structure, correct.
But I don't
But
think it's, I'm sorry, go ahead, Christy.
It's not high enough density. It only goes up to 10 acres or 10 units in it. 10 acre. 10. That's it.
Okay.
Not the
thanks.
20.
Got it.
We have seen past discussions and maps where people were trying to do like a commercial component kind of closer to the freeway, and then back in the trees, a RCFE, a residential care facility for the elderly. And staff grappled with mixed use in a mixed use structure. But then it also talks about projects that definition of mixed use structure also lends itself to on the same parcel or development. So it ends up, when we get to those glossary definitions, I think those are important to look at if you want to increase densities on the TD parcels.
All right, and we'll go back to the question, and sounds like Ramona had a suggestion if she had to. I don't hear anybody else. So I guess would say that our committee doesn't have a suggestion for the identification of the minimum 2.2 acres in our purview. Anybody disagree with that? Okay. Anything else, Mark?
No, I believe we have addressed all of the issues here, unless the committee has any other issues that we haven't discussed.
Ramona has her hand up.
Actually, I do have another question, because you're showing, the boundary edges of Loomis and where it meets Rockland, the parcels, and I can't really see, it's kind of grayed out. So right along the edge of Loomis, where it meets Rockland, what kind of development is on those edges? Just out of curiosity.
It's a very good question.
So
That's
is
all the subdivision behind Walmart.
Yep, that's Rockland. And it's a big development. It's a big housing development. There's two developments there. One is behind Walmart and the other is down farther.
It's down here, right?
Rockland, where's
Wait, no. Let me find Barton Road again. You'd think as a planner I'd have this stuff figured out. Here we go. Here's Barton Road.
There you go.
There's Barton Road, and it comes down here. And let me do these through the wonders of modern technology. Oops, why did you not? Let's do this. Okay, so, oops, where's Barton Road? This is Barton here. There's Rockland. So, there's Rockland. So there's Rockland Road. This is Barton Road. Here's Barton Road, and here's the shopping center. This is Wally World. This looks like a subdivision in here. What I don't know, and I suppose we'll find out as we move forward, is I'm not sure what their land use element shows for this area. But given what they have here, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of the same.
Yeah, okay.
So I know on the corner of Rockland Road and Sierra College, they're going to be putting in about 1,000 units. And then we have an equestrian center on one of our edges, and that will be surrounded on the Rockland side with all residential developments as well.
Yeah, Bonnie's talking about that yellow area there.
This area here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got one comment here, if that's
Go ahead,
okay.
Greg, please.
Yeah, if along with, Bonnie's talking about kind of in that area, you go Rockland Road to Sierra College, you got that high density project in Rockland. You get on Sierra, turn left and head south on Sierra College Boulevard. Just as you go up to the hill on the left, that is Luma's property again. Now I know we've discussed that issue, many times in the past. And unfortunately, I think you have unwilling property owners to that. But if you had to make a suggestion, I think that's where you would put that higher density designation. Do you guys know the area I'm talking about?
Can you use your...
Go out Rockland Road, go into Rockland a little bit, and then head south. And right where the property line to Loomis juts out, there's a green RA area.
Is this part right in here?
Yeah, right in there. Yeah, right in there. We've talked about that as being high density for housing for Loomis in the past. However, the issue was it was an unwilling property owner. But if you had to make a suggestion, that's what I would suggest. And possibly we can ask the property owners again if they've changed their minds. So do you see the areas I'm talking about? Yeah, right in there.
So if I understand correctly, though, like Ridge Park Drive, isn't that a gated development?
Well, you can go, I think you've got enough property if you go a little bit north of that, right? Yeah, right in there, right in that section in there. I think in there you would have enough land. If you can get a property owner to go along with it. You can make the recommendation, it may not go anywhere, but.
So it would be right here if I understand what you're talking about.
Right where you had your arrow a moment ago.
Yeah, right here.
Right in there.
And I think that is just going by luck and by golly. Here's Ridge Park, which would be right here.
Yeah.
It would be in this area right here. So I believe.
I don't see your arrow. Yep, right in there.
Yeah. So you can't see the left-hand side?
I can't. Well,
there you go.
You had it a moment ago. No. Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay.
I was trying to show you on the aerial, but that way they can see that it is in fact vacant land.
Yeah, I think there's a home there.
Yes.
It's not totally vacant, but
there are several owners and several homes actually in that various acreage. And when we talked to them before, they were adamantly not interested. And that would have been when we did the housing element in 2014. But who knows, things change. Greg's right. If we could pick our druthers, where would we put it? That's probably a good place because it's right across from apartments in Rockland.
Right. And that's my point. That is the best place. Not that it's doable, but that is the best place.
Gene, at this and committee, at this point in time, we actually have several building permits in for that area. We have property owners who are Like we have a new, the very first one, they have a house there and they just built a detached garage and they're putting in an ADU. The next door property has just sold, and I heard from the property owners, probably within just the last 2 to 3 days, about how excited they were to come in and build their house there. So I think that that area is not as available as what it looks on paper, because like I said, I do have several building permits in for various projects right now.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Carol.
But it's a really
Yeah.
good thought. That's the best we've had thus far. So thank you. That was awesome.
I figured it would die on the vine, but I thought I'd give it a try.
No, that's brilliant.
Good
Well,
idea.
it's already been discussed in the past. It's not a new concept. G knows exactly what I'm talking about.
But I think from the standpoint of a potential, because it's right there adjacent to a small shopping center and apartments, that we continue to let the land use committee know about that. Decision doesn't have to be made for a while, but at least we can come back as a town and revisit that potential area in the future.
Ramona, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with that, because that's why I was looking at the edges of Rockland, because you wouldn't really notice, in a sense, that it looks kind of like Rockland, and then the more rural area starts after that. But in general, it doesn't really meet I know it's only 2.2 acres, which is really not very big at all. So I'm kind of okay with that. But the question I have with it is how do you mitigate the creep, if you will, of people wanting to redesignate their properties to smaller sizes from RA to, well, if this is high density over here, how come I can't have residential medium high density right next to it? And do you know what I'm getting at? That, if you want your town to be more concentrated, a traditional town is more concentrated in the center, and then goes outwards towards more rural and agricultural land. This flies in the face of that. I mean, it's only 2.2 acres, but then what do you set up with as far as other property owners then requesting to keep upsizing the number of lots that they can have based on the precedent you might set?
Right. Like a
Yeah, I
domino
agree.
effect.
That's exactly the argument for the northern part of town along Sierra College and Bankhead. That exact same argument applies. I'm talking about the BEM project.
Yeah, I agree. That's a concern I
Yeah.
have with that.
Right.
BEM is what
Yeah.
do you set up Sierra College to do on up? So it's the same kind of idea. Just we're talking about 2.2 acres, not, I forget how much that
Not
was.
189.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway.
But
All
that
right,
same
so-
way,
Go ahead, Ramona.
2.2, to me, 2.2 in the tourist destination, at least you're closer to town, where it makes sense that you're closer to town, and it's only 2.2 acres. So maybe there's a place to put it if we had to in this area of town. I mean, Loomis is doesn't have a lot of land to work with in general, but having high density towards the highway would make more sense.
I've got another idea I'm gonna throw out. It doesn't apply to this area. It applies over to the old village site and the high density land, the 7 acres that's designated for residential high, RH. If you were to take that 7 acres and expand it, rezone that out to 10 acres, then you would have enough. That would be if the Hidden Grove project fails.
Yeah, I think that the housing, it was the housing people that said that they didn't want it all in one place.
Yeah, HCD said that they won't allow us to put all of it in one spot like that.
Oh, okay.
I think following up with this is Sean, sorry. Following up with what Ramona was saying, if you were going to put high density in the TD, I would say to do the north side, not the south. Yeah. And then the other one that's a potential, I think, because of its proximity to Rockland, similar to what Greg was talking about, is the Nuns property that was up for sale that is recently sold. That butts up against Rockland Road, obviously, and then you've got Rockland right next to it with the Sierra College project that is being proposed. So
Yeah, I
It
think
does
that's a
create-
good, yeah, I think that's a good area also, because any any high density development along Rockland Road in that area, your exit area, it heads towards Sierra Colors Boulevard, they go straight down Rockland Road to I-80. So all that traffic wouldn't funnel through Loomis. So that would be another good possibility.
And Ramona has her hand up.
Yeah, I think Sean was referencing the Nuns property, but didn't we just as a group decline the
We did.
increased density?
Yeah.
He had stepped out. He didn't hear that, so he didn't know. So
Also, Christy, what comes to mind for me is that, is it in the circulation element that there are no additional access points off of Rockland Road? Everything would have to come in through Barton on that corner parcel?
That you shouldn't have residential driveways. If you had, say, one driveway serving a large number of units, that's a little different than just a single unit's driveway.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
okay, so
We
just
we
to
don't have to, we don't have to designate 2.2 acres in one place, do we? If it's enough to build something of decent size, it could be on more than one parcel, is that correct?
Yes, Lucy, what's the minimum size that HCD will accept?
It has to be at least half an acre.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay, circling back, committee members, does anybody have any other suggestions to where they might want to identify this higher density in our purview? And anybody in the public? Sounds like this committee does not have any suggestions for that. So, Mark?
I don't have anything else for the subcommittee to discuss. And I'm wondering whether the subcommittee is ready to send the revised text, as we discussed, to the main committee.
Okay, so now, Anders, we have to come up with a motion, is that right?
That's correct.
If I could interject just a moment, not to upset the cart here, can we confirm that we reviewed the potential build outs that were shown in the PowerPoint?
Yeah,
we
we
did that
reviewed
last
those.
time.
Yeah, we reviewed that last time, Mary Beth.
Okay, thank you. Excuse the ring.
So Mary Beth, you have that sample text for a resolution.
I do. So in forwarding your recommendations and your hard work to the Land Use Umbrella Committee, the motion would be, this is a motion of the Southeast I-80 Horseshoe Bar Road Subcommittee to forward our recommendation for goals, policies, objectives, and implementation measures for our committee's assignment as modified by today's meeting. This committee recognizes that this completes our task at this time and that we have an opportunity to continue to participate in the Land Use Umbrella Committee as they finalize their review for recommendation to the Planning Commission and Town Council of the draft 2020-2040 General Plan Update.
I so move.
Who was that? Who was that?
Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Do I hear a second?
Second from Jean.
Okay, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Okay, let's see. Bonnie Linden,
Yes.
Jean Wilson,
Yes.
Jen Clark Prince,
Yes.
Ryan DiMartini,
Yes.
and that's everybody.
Okay, motion passes. I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of the committee members for their hard work and long hours, and know that this has been tedious but super, super important to our town. Thank you to all the experts that have helped us. Thank you for the public members that have helped us and auxiliary members. And thank you to the staff for their long work and appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, so much. And I will adjourn the meeting now, 4:57. All right, thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. You rock.
Awesome.
I retired now, so I got a little more time to do stuff like that.
Retired from where?
So, well, I was